Mr. Speaker, to be honest, I never planned to go through this. But when I heard the history lesson on Tuesday from the minister, I said we have to set the record straight. You can't, if you're going to give a history lesson, then be fulsome with the history lesson. I am not going to stand up here and pretend that every time we have been at the wicket has been great. None of us can. You can't, we can't. But if we're going to give the history lesson, give it fully and completely.
Well, they did say in life that we should all be careful of what we wish for. And apparently, Julian, not being a prophet like so many of us, could not have anticipated what the government side would have done in this debate when he made the comment that if you're going to be showing the history, show it the fulsome history, not just partial history. And so he felt put out, and that he had to, go through all of this history lesson and, according to him, set the record straight. Well, Mas Andrew turned up in the parliament and decided to take up the challenge. Not only did he give the history lessons, but he went back as far as 1962 and showed the charts for all the years coming right up to the latest information, whether that is 2022, 2024. That's what he did, and show the peaks and the troughs of the, I'm not sure if he showed the employment rate, I'm sure he did. He showed the growth rate from 1962 onward. He showed the productivity rate and also the employment rate, or unemployment rate as it may be, and many others. We're going to show a clip from his speech that we found interesting and deserving of airing and commentary if there's anything to say about it in terms of clarity and so on. So that's what we're going to bring you today. So Mas Julian asked for history, and we got a lot of history on Thursday from the Prime Minister, Mas Andrew Holness. Anyway, hello everyone. Welcome to Jamaica 411. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Michelle Stern, and I'm your host. Several persons have been asking, who are you? My name is Michelle Stern, and I'm the host. Let me say a special shout out to my subscribers and welcome you back. Always lovely to have you. I would like to say thank you for your continued support. You are a tower of strength. Yes, you are. I also want you to know that I do enjoy reading your comments, so please keep the comments going. If you're here with me for the first time, welcome. I hope that after watching this video, you would have found the truth that you came seeking. If you have not yet done so, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel because, as you know, old-time people say, encouragement sweetens labor. Not true. I would also like to ask all of you a big favor. Please share this video. Yes, and for your kindness, I thank you all in advance. Well, now that you're back with me, let's get down to business. So I'm going to let you hear Mas Andrew. I'll see if there's anything I can comment about. I will, I think you may need a little clarity. But in the main, I'll try my best to keep quiet so you can hear what the Prime Minister has to say. But as I said, if there's something that I need to comment on, I will. So don't mind me butting in from time to time, all right? Great.
And this was driven by two global oil price shocks, a failed experiment with democratic socialism, a global recession that slashed bauxite revenues, and Hurricanes Allen and Gilbert in 1980 and 1988, respectively. The second period of debt distress, was from the 1990s to the late 2010s. PJ Patterson. And it stemmed largely from the PNP's policy during the Finsac era, which collapsed financial institutions, wiped out the business class, and triggered a prolonged recession worsened by the 2008 to 2009 global financial crisis. In the mid-1990s, Jamaica faced a financial sector crisis, which resulted in the collapse of a number of financial institutions. The financial sector meltdown was not caused by any exogenous, meaning outside shocks or global crisis. In fact, the US, our major trading partner, had robust growth in the 1990s, averaging 3.4% per annum. This was purely caused by bad government, bad policy choices, and poor superintendence of the economy. Listen to me clearly, members. Finsac was a homegrown domestic crisis wholly caused by the PNP, for which we are now only just recovering. Our debt to GDP prior to the advent of the Finsac crisis was 72%. The government at the time established Finsac to bail out the collapsed financial institutions. This bailout cost the country 42% of GDP. In other words, 42% of what we produce in any 1 year, we had to take it to pay for Finsac. By way of comparison, the US government's bailout intervention during the global financial crisis of 2008-2009 was only 9% of their GDP. So you see the magnitude of the scale of Finsac relative to the size of our economy. Within 6 years after the establishment of Finsac, our debt spiraled out of control from 72% of GDP to 130% of GDP, almost doubling. That caused interest costs alone on the debt to consume almost 70% of tax revenues. So just the cost to pay for the debt, the interest at one point cost us 70% of all the tax revenues that we collect. If you add public sector wages to that and other things that you have to pay for out of tax revenue, then you basically would have no money left. You would have no money left to fix roads, no money left to build schools, no money left to repair clinics, no money left to pay for water. So if you ever wondered, if you ever wondered why we have so much infrastructure that has been left unmaintained and now falling apart, if you ever wondered why things are the way they are, if you ever wondered, Madam Speaker, it's an important point that needs to be made. Because the average man listening might, in the background of the shrill of noise that we hear, this might go way back in their memory. And they see a pothole emerge in a road, and they wonder, why doesn't the government fix that pothole now? But they will never stop and reflect on a very important point, Madam Speaker, that when this road was built, 30 or 40 years ago, what should have happened is that there should have been a reserve maintenance programmed into the budget, matched with what they call the engineered life of the road, that as a little crack emerges, out of the revenues that you have, you go and you use some tar chemical and you seal that crack. So no pothole appears. But that road that you are looking at now, that the potholes are all emerging, they weren't maintained. And the reason why they couldn't be maintained is because we had to take almost 70% of our tax revenues to pay for the bad policy choices of the PNP during the 1990s and Finsac. I want Jamaicans to understand that lack of maintenance accumulates. Lack of spending on infrastructure amounts to what is called disinvestment. So you can build a hospital, but if you don't maintain a schedule of maintenance, the value of that hospital declines, depreciates. So today when you look at the hospital and say, why this government don't do something about it? Even if this government were to take all the money it has now, it couldn't today immediately halt and stop the deterioration. I think the public must understand this. Because, Madam Speaker, it is the same public that voted in the same PNP government over and over and over again. It is a point that needs to be understood, that the economic struggle that the country has had to restore its economy is so that it is able to have revenues steady and stable and predictable that it can then use to maintain and provide the things you want over a long period without making bad decisions to put those revenues in peril. If you want to know what drives me, Madam Speaker, is to make sure that we never go back. So, Madam Speaker, so if you want to know what is the root of our problems today, it is the bad policies of the PNP in the 1990s. Madam Speaker, they don't like to hear this. And 90% of Jamaica may not appreciate and understand it, but we're going to bring the facts. Madam Speaker, the root cause of the crisis, the Finsac crisis, was the premature policy decisions of the PNP to liberalize the foreign exchange market in 1991 without the necessary preconditions such as reserves in place. In other words, they went to party but didn't have any money. This triggered a rapid depreciation of the Jamaican dollar and skyrocketing prices with inflation reaching 80% in 1991 and 40% in 1992. Not having any rent money to ward off speculators, the government then tried to protect the exchange rate through exorbitant interest rates. As a result, productive enterprises, especially small businesses, were unable to service their loans, and the loans became non-performing. Mounting non-performing loans and loan defaults then caused banks to collapse. Madam Speaker, the PNP's high interest rate policy created a two-tiered economy. One where cash-rich speculators thrived while productive businesses drowned in insurmountable debt. This led to what a prominent member of the PNP described as the largest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich since slavery. Madam Speaker, who were the beneficiaries of this wealth transfer from the poor to the rich? Is there anyone in this house who was a part of this ill-conceived policy, whose business it was to profit from the great transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich? The fallout was immense. It is estimated that over 40,000 businesses collapsed, wiping out entrepreneurs and leaving thousands destitute. This decimated the manufacturing sector in Jamaica. Burdened with high-cost debt, unable to retool to keep competitive, many factories closed during this period. We recall companies like Thermoplastic, Highgate Food Products, Home Electrics, and others too numerous to name that could not survive the inhospitable climate that Finsac created. Madam Speaker, those who formed the government that presided over this economic debacle have never apologized or even expressed any remorse. Worse, they have the audacity to lecture this administration on how to run an economy. For the next 20 years after the PNP inflicted Finsac, the Finsac shock, we basically just meandered along as a country with no attempt to fix the real problem. Our debt situation was already unsustainable when the global financial crisis hit in 2008-2009, and that took the country to the verge of bankruptcy. The real attempt at grappling with high debt, high interest rate, this vicious cycle created by the PNP, started with the Bruce Golding-led administration of 2007 to 2011. Indeed, we fathered the deep structural reforms needed to break the PNP-created debt crisis. The debt inherited from the PNP had reached unsustainable levels, and it was under the leadership of Bruce Golding and Audley Shaw Manayard supported by enlightened and patriotic members of the private sector and reasonable unions that the first structured debt exchange was engineered, JDX. This pulled Jamaica from the brink of another financial collapse by successfully reducing Jamaica's interest costs, extending debt maturity, improving debt sustainability, and giving the country the credibility to approach the IMF. We put in place the fiscal responsibility framework, which enhanced transparency, accountability, and reporting on public finances and placed limits on the fiscal deficit. This was the basis for the fiscal rule legislation and all the other reforms we have today. We took tough steps to divest loss-making public entities such as the Sugar Company and Air Jamaica, which under the PNP racked up huge debts and operating losses carried over from the 18.5 years of poor management and lack of superintendence of public bodies. And when we were the opposition, we did our part in supporting and developing many nascent measures, including working assiduously on every piece of legislation required to meet the IMF timelines. I gave direct instructions to my members of the House and the Senate that we must not hold up any of the IMF bills. We were a responsible and constructive father, even in opposition. We acted in the interest of Jamaica's economic recovery. In everything we did, we chose Jamaica over narrow political partisan gain. No one on this side said that the PNP did not contribute to the national effort to restructure and reform the economy and bring down the debt. As recently as November last year at the launch of our Next Chapter policy pivot, I said, and I quote, "Let me express my deepest gratitude to all who played a role in this transformation. Leaders from both sides of the political aisle, business leaders, our civil service, unions, members of civil society, and most importantly, the people of Jamaica. I want to specially recognize and thank the Honorable Bruce Golding, former Prime Minister. The Most Honorable Portia Simpson-Miller, former Prime Minister. The member, you know, Madam Speaker. Yeah, Madam Speaker. There is a running joke between myself and the member from East Kingston and Port Royal. You know, he is her adopted first son, and I am her adopted and reclaimed second son. You remember I was disowned for a little period of time. But the member from East Kingston and Port Royal know that we made up. So it was very easy for me, with no malice or ill feeling or ill will, to acknowledge the work and contribution of the Most Honorable Portia Simpson-Miller. The Honorable Peter Phillips, former leader of the opposition and Minister of Finance. The Honorable Audley Manayard Shaw, former Minister of Finance. Nigel Clark, former Minister of Finance. Richard Biles, Governor of the Bank of Jamaica and former Chairman of the Economic Policy Oversight Committee, EPAC. Keith Duncan, who took over as Chairman of EPAC after Mr. Biles. All the members, and I'm eternally and always grateful to all the members of the National Partnership Council. But most of all, I want to thank the people of Jamaica for their patience, resilience, courage, and sacrifice. Jamaica's turnaround would have been impossible without the willingness of the Jamaican people to endure the hardships that they had to bear. This is my public statement for the public record as to how we on this side characterize this period of economic recovery. So this falsehood and attempt at whitewashing history, this kind of revisionism, is unnecessary, indeed undignified. Let me give a fair and balanced characterization of the historical development of the Jamaican economy. The PNP, through bad policy decisions, created the second debt crisis. They created the first one as well. The JLP took the first fundamental steps to address the problem. The PNP contributed and built on those steps, and the JLP further built on those steps and completed the reforms. While we acknowledge the work of the PNP in the national effort across administrations, any political credit they should get for contributing to the solution is totally wiped out because they are the ones whose bad policy caused the problem in the first place. To their true bipolar nature, the PNP wants to claim paternity after causing the mother, the people, so much hardship. In their last budget presentation, the leader of the opposition and the opposition spokesman on finance disingenuously accused the government of increasing taxes on the people of Jamaica. In this budget presentation, well, in the last budget presentation, the leader of the opposition said, since the JLP government came into office, they have more than doubled the annual tax take, increasing it by a massive $190,000 per person. Yet, in his recent budget presentation this year, the leader of the opposition and the opposition spokesman on finance both claim that the improved performance of tax revenue is due to the tax reform work of the PNP. So we need to ask ourselves, is it the PNP that is responsible for Jamaicans paying more taxes? In the 2023 budget, the leader of the opposition complained that the government was moving too fast to reduce debt. He advocated that we abandon the fiscal responsible path, use $40 billion, in other words, go and party with the rent money, money that we're supposed to use for debt repayment, to spend on temporary relief. In this budget, when he sees the amazing benefit of reducing the debt to 68%, and the amazing fiscal space that is created for us to actually now sustainably deal with the relief effort, he now comes claiming that the reduction in debt is due to the PNP's faithfulness to fiscal prudence. This reminds me of the classic tale of what we in Jamaica sometimes regretfully call Butler's father, who caused the mother so much pain and then abandons the child. But when the child grows up to be successful, out of the blue they turn up to claim paternity and associate with success. This leader of the opposition is a man of convenience, flip-flopping between prudence and popularity when it suits him. 1 minute he disowns the child of fiscal discipline, and then the next he claims the child of fiscal discipline. The mother remembers the pain of Finsac and the high interest rate policy, the largest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich, and she knows that she cannot trust this worthless man. So the DNA test was done. The DNA test was done. The results are in. When it comes to 15-year-old fiscal discipline, PNP, you are not the father. Yes, your name call. But it is another goaling that is the father. Madam Speaker, jokes aside, Madam Speaker, jokes aside, this is the first time our debt to GDP ratio is below pre-Finsac levels of the mid-1990s. It has therefore taken us 30 years to undo the damage of the self-inflicted blow of the PNP's economic mismanagement of the 90s. 30 years.
So now you understand what I mean when I said that Julian more or less got what he called for. He asked for a history lesson, a proper history lesson, and that is what he got. And this is the issue also, of the risers, because had they not brought out PJ to come and talk about the past, perhaps Andrew Holness would not have been inspired to bring this history lesson that is so embarrassing to the party in an election year and so close to the election as well. That clearly was a poor tactical decision that they made to bring out PJ to come set records straight. And see the record set straight now? How is the PNP going to recover from this? It cannot. And now the young people they were trying to bring on board, they now know what went on. Because Andrew Holness never said a thing that was not true, for sure. It was such a stupid thing to do to go and bring up the 90s. There were just too many bad things that took place then, far exceeded the good that was done. And therefore, they should have stayed clear of discussing anything about the 1990s. But they didn't. They were desperate. And so they went and draw for the one man that they think would help them. And now look what they have caused. How are they going to recover from this? I personally don't see how. What is more, this refrain, we are not going back to those days, is the one refrain that is bound to affect even the donations that the party is likely to get from the private sector. That's how bad I think this thing is. He also touched on what he would describe as the cause of the financial meltdown in the 90s. And he spoke about the rapid introduction of the reform that they had at the time, the deregulation of the economy, which was that a sort of a reform. And you remember we did that. We did an analysis of that through the eyes of R. Danny Williams, who had made a submission to the Finsac Commission. And he pointed out that when he and the other persons in the insurance and banking system went visiting PJ to advise him on deregulating the economy, he had said that they had insisted that the deregulation should not be piecemeal, it should be rapid. And then R. Danny Williams went on to say that when the rapid deregulation of the economy took place, that the foreign exchange devalued 108% in 6 months, and the inflation was 100%. And of course, the business started to collapse, especially the manufacturers. They were collapsing. And that was how we know they could not have been represented at that meeting, and that was PJ's fault. That would have been his mistake, not to ensure that the persons who were sitting before him and advising him about how they think the economy will grow, because that was the intention, They were telling him to do this thing and you see the economy take off, right? There were no manufacturers there to say, no, PJ, you can't do it rapidly. that policy would sink us. He would then have asked how much time you need. He may have said, give me about 6 months. Give us time to retool, and then we should be ready for the opening of the economy. And that was his mistake, right? Going to listen to this narrow group of people who were there only to serve their own interests. Because the bankers thought they would make a whole heap of money, and the insurers thought that they would make a whole pile of money. Instead, a whole damn bunch of them collapsed. So that was that. Yes, in that report as well, we exposed the role of Bunting and Golding in terms of the sweetheart deal they would have received from Finsac when they were gifted Billy Craig. We still have not yet found out how much did Daring Bunting and Golding purchase the shares from Finsac. I'm pretty sure it must have been at market price based on the value of the company. But then again, the shares that Finsac held, the 49%, that they paid for $148 million in order to settle the debt of Billy Craig so that it can continue to operate. $148 million for 49%. And Daring Bunting and Golding contributed way below the $52 million because it was two companies, right? And that was where the sweetheart deal was. They were able to take over some cambios that Billy Craig owned, and that is how them started to make money. That was the sweetheart deal, right? That was why they were so silent when this business of Finsac came up, because they know the Labour Party did not find what it was and how it was that they actually benefited, and they knew it was there, ready to sink them. It was a Billy Craig deal. Billy Craig was in deficit to the tune of $237 million. They had owed that money well above what it was that their assets were. I believe it was 70 million. And Daring Bunting and Golding wanted it because it was a merchant bank, plus it had a cambio with several branches. So they couldn't afford to buy it, and Finsac pumped $148 million of taxpayers' money to take on 49% of the shares. And Daring Bunting and Golding, they contributed far less than $52 million because they had bought the other business, two Billy Craig business, and one of them they had owned 100%. And they owned 50% of the merchant bank, right? And therefore, since their contribution was $52 million, we know it was well less than $52 million that they contributed to that 50%. And that is where the sweetheart deal came into it. Yes. The contract that Finsac entered into with Daring Bunting and Golding for the joint venture that they entered into to deal with this Billy Craig problem. That joint venture contract is not on the Ministry of Finance website. It's not among the Finsac report. It's not among the Finsac report. And I requested it, and until now, I got no answer. Well, the Ministry of Finance, please find that file and upload it to the website so we can see what was the nature of the agreement between Finsac and Daring Bunting and Golding, that Finsac would take up $148 million of taxpayers' money to buy 49% of Billy Craig, while Daring Bunting and Golding, we need to know how much they contributed to the merchant bank and how much they contributed to the finance section, because that now is a scandal. That is taxpayers' money being used to bail out private interests for no good reason, because several of the merchant banks, they allowed them to collapse. And this one was clearly only propped up because it was heavily in debt. So it was only propped up and financed by Finsac in order to do a favor to the three partners and the shareholders, I suppose, of Daring Bunting and Golding. Figure that. Anyway, folks, that's it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me, for sharing, liking, subscribing, and leaving your comments in the comments section. So until next time, take very good care of yourselves and walk good.